Imagine your phone rings and you see this name of somebody you like. What would you do? Versus you see the name of somebody that you don't like. What would you do? It turns out that the attitude that we have, not only in regards to specific individuals, but also in regards to group of individuals, affect our behavior in small ways that can be interpreted as an affirmation or an aggression. And with that can lead to inclusion or exclusion. If you're interested to learn more about your beliefs and how they affect your micro behaviors, stay tuned for today's session. Hi, welcome to the School of Becoming. My name is Ingo Raun, and together with a board of supporters and advisors, we have created a program on activating inclusion. In this program, we will talk about activating inclusion on an individual, interpersonal, leadership, organizational, and cultural level. This program and today's speaker is brought to you in collaboration with Manage Magazine. Ana Perez is a senior gender advisor at RTI International, where she's also the associate director of RTI's Global Gender Center. Ana has worked as a gender expert around the world for more than 10 years. And I was very happy when she not only agreed to teach us some of what she has learned in this session here today, but also to support us as an advisor on this program on activating inclusion. With that, welcome, Ana.
Thank you, Ingo, and welcome everyone to today's session. I'm very pleased to be with all of you today. Since our founding with the one single employee in 1958, we have grown to be one of the world-leading research institutes, remaining focused on our mission to improve the human condition by creating and turning knowledge into practice. And today, I really hope that we're able to do that, to be able to turn the knowledge that we have into practice. We have several exercises that will help us to do that. The objective of today, I want us to go away with three main pieces. The first one is to explore and examine our own messages, the messages that are happening every day, and then seeing how those messages that we're sending impact others, specifically at work, and then turning it around a little bit and thinking about what is the power of these smaller positive messages that we send, and how that can really create an inclusive culture. In order to do that, we're going to need to bring two characters into our session. The people that we're going to think about, the people that are going to be helping us through our learning today, are two people that are in your life right now, maybe today, or maybe people in your past. But I want you to think about two colleagues. Write them down. The first person, the first colleague, is someone that you really admire, someone that you enjoy working with, someone that adds a lot of value, someone that you just enjoy being around and really gravitate towards. On the other side of the paper, or just write it down next to each other, think about another colleague, someone who you may have experienced a little bit of resistance, or you just don't like to work with this person. I'm going to give you an example. For example, if it's Friday night, a Friday afternoon, after work, almost finishing work, and you get a phone call, and you look at your cell phone, and if the person ringing is colleague A, I will immediately pick up the phone. But if it's colleague V, maybe someone that I'll look on the phone, but maybe I'll put it down and see if it goes to voicemail, and maybe I'll respond, maybe I'll respond on Monday. Someone who there's a little bit of resistance there. So give me a thumbs up when you have identified the names of the two individuals. They're going to really help us to our learning today. Use the reaction box to let me know if you have identified the two people. Great, I see a lot of thumbs up. So now that you have identified it, this is so that the learnings that we have today become very relevant to us. Okay, here's a scenario that we're gonna play this scenario as we think about these two individuals. And if you're not currently working, think about someone who may have worked in the past where that you can identify the two specific names. This scenario is as follows. You have been working on a very important project, and for several months. And just before the project is due, you're in a meeting and your colleague makes a mistake. Not only does he make a mistake, but that mistake makes you have to redo some work. Write down, the ask now is, in the piece of paper, when you put, next to the person that you wrote as a colleague A, start making a list of anything that comes up for you under the same scenario, but what would you react if it was the person A versus person B? Everything that comes, like physically, how are you reacting if you're in that moment? What will you say? What will you do? What are your facial expressions that are coming out? Are you smiling? Thank you, Ingo. Here are some examples just to get us started. For example, for me, if it was colleague A, it will still surprise me that this error happened. So I'll take a deep breath, and maybe I'll make a joke, and then I will say something like, "Hey, don't worry about it. It happened to me last year, so I know this is horrible, but I have cleared my schedule so that I can help out. Let's get it done." What would I said if it was colleague B? For the second person, maybe my reaction would have been, my eyes would be like wide open to know that it was this big mistake. My facial expression would change. I'll put my hands in my head, and I will feel like my stomach will be turning. If I'm careful enough, I'll probably even turn off the camera, the video, if I'm on a Zoom call, and then I'll be like, I'll make a big sight. I'll probably be sending a direct email or a very dry email, perhaps even copying the boss of that person. These are just things to get us started. Take a moment now. I'm going to pause for a second. Let's take a moment just to write everything that comes for you, from your physiological structure to your thoughts to your words, everything. So let's go to the next slide and type in the chat box what came up. What were some of the things that you noticed when you see the two lists compared to each other? Anything that came up? There are a few more things that are coming up in the chat. So the willingness to support colleague A, Samantha, Lindsay, excluding colleague B, but including colleague A, absolutely. Chris, I would like to try to figure out a way that this colleague will have to redo the work. Kim, I was far more yielding towards A than B. I get a benefit. I gave the benefit of the doubt to A, but perhaps not to the other. Thank you. So let's see. To summarize, here are a few comments. The attitudes that we have really affect our behavior. As you can see here, it's like the attitude that we had towards the other person had a huge impact on those messages that were coming, those macro messages that were being sent. It is the same scenario, but how we perceive the other person really changes. So the questions that come for me were the responses okay? Like, I just take a moment to reflect on how was that person on the B category being treated? How would that person be affected at work if the person see all of my reactions that way? And and just a moment to reflect. To further explore this process, Ingo's gonna show us a video in a moment. Take a look at this video because it's not only as paralyzed as colleague A and colleague B, and we will be using colleague A and B further through our session today. But I wanna show you a video. Take a look at this character and see what this person is experiencing throughout. See all the messages that are being sent, and especially what is triggering the messages and the macro messages that you see on the video. So let's try to identify where were the smaller messages. Renee, what I see is that I got from video is giving the message that respect is based on what you do, but not who you are as a human being. So the person didn't like the video. And Robert, thank you for sharing that part. Susan, the little girl seemed open to him. Yes. So there were also positive messages that are being sent. Kim, the salesperson, looked at the security guard. All of these macro messages that are being constantly being that are happening. We don't sometimes even know that they're there, and you may on the receiving end you may not even notice them either, or you may notice them and see those positive and negative ones. What were some of those biases that are being triggered? So those biases being triggered by either stress or like being on a rush or multitasking, the need for closure. All of these things are really heightened that moment where these biases are coming in. And to help better understand that, Ingo will show us the next slide, where we want to talk about the three different levels. The first one is, well, first is the biases, the unconscious biases, that they're the concepts. But how do they materialize in tangible components is the micro messages that are being sent constantly. Those micro messages can be subdivided in macro affirmations or microaggressions. Let's look at the macro affirmations. The macro affirmations are all of these small little gestures that show inclusion, caring, and really have a very positive impact in our interactions. On the other end of the spectrum, we have all of the macroaggressions, all of these brief and commonplace verbal, behavioral, environmental, all of these indignities that really, whether are intentional or unintentional, have the process of actually leaving people out. This is one thing that I would like to highlight. The component there's a lot of research that has been taking place, is that the positive macro messages really have an impact on how people engage at work. And I want to show you a video that I really like from Dr. Mary Rowe. She really was the person back in the 70s that there has been a lot of research on microaggressions, but she was the person from MIT that started looking and exploring more about the positive component, the macroaffirmations. These are just the implications of the culture of rich microaffirmations that were listed during the video, just for reference. I want to show you a model, well, the inclusion scale that a consulting company called Korn Ferry developed. It shows how we, based on our differences, how we may be holding people in a different scale. So it goes from it's a five scale. So it goes from all the way to from appreciation all the way to repulsion. So take a moment to look at all of the different ranges, and this is based on reactions to differences. And as you can imagine, on the ones related to tolerance, avoidance, and repulsion are the ones where those macroaggressions are more constantly happening. So how do we become more deliberate about really engaging with macro affirmations, even when we see these differences? I want to take a moment of reflection. We started our session with our two work colleagues, but let's take a look at everybody else around us. This is not going to be shared; it's just for your own reflection. Here are a few questions to prompt out that concept of thinking. Think about the last month, the last couple of weeks. Who are we excluding? Who are we listening to? Who are you encouraging? Who am I praising? After you reflect on all these questions, also take a next layer of understanding and see, did any of these interactions vary by gender, by race, by ethnicity, by any of the other intersectionalities that exist? All right, we can continue the reflection afterwards. On the next slide, what I would like to invite us to do is to reflect and recognize that we're not only on the receiving end, we're also on the, we're sending those messages. So we are never immune from being a perpetrator. So what do we do is, when we start seeing resistance, when we start seeing that tension, that distrust, those symptoms of distances, distance, start with introspection. I invite us to start with thinking about what am I doing that is sending that signal. Assess or tone or facial expressions, gestures. And also start thinking about what are my macro triggers? What are the things that are happening that may be triggering for me? And that's, as part of the emotional intelligence, starts with, self-awareness and then self-regulation. On our next slide, I want us to, we're going to do a group activity. But what we would like to explore now is looking back at those two colleagues that we were talking about earlier. In groups, think about, answer these two questions. How effective would you be at work if you were treated, especially colleague A and B? And then thinking about colleague B, how would your response be different if you, by becoming more aware of your macro messages, and how can you possibly include micro affirmations despite the fact that the situation was not ideal? Great. So what came out? What were some of the things that you discussed in your breakouts, specifically about? Well, let's start with the first question. How effective would have been dealing specifically with person B? Thank you, Lauren. Very important. Also recognizing that we may be the one being held as a B in someone else. Like, so how if I'm the one who is, if we see this inclusion scale, maybe I'll be in the repulsion or in the tolerance or acceptance in someone else's view. So how is that impacting my performance, and also what is my ability to recognize that these things happen? And I just gave one scenario on the making a mistake, but there's so many things that happen every day that these messages are constantly being sent. Yeah. Anything else that any other groups that wanna share in terms of response to any of these two questions? Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And the next slide that Ingo will show us shows a list of different cues, of affirmation cues on things that we could do to be more affirming, from asking questions and solicit someone's opinion, and definitely acknowledging by name who's actually giving the person the owner the credit of the idea. Follow through is, if you say you're going to do something, if I invite you for lunch, let's meet for lunch or a virtual coffee. Be aware of your facial expressions and also your physical space. Sometimes I've been in meetings, and this is like pre-COVID days, where, just by the way you were leaning in one side, you're like leaving the other person behind. And there's this nuanced little moments of exclusion that may prevent someone to wanting to speak or feel included. Active listening, call out interruptions, try not to have side conversations, draw in participation, and also look at how you monitor, like how do you say hello to people when you see someone that you know and you feel connected, and on the scales, on the appreciation scale, is like super excited and happy. But if that person is next to someone that you hold in the lower scale, how is that accelerating that process of exclusion? And also, we have also the power of interrupt any macro inequities that we see around us. The next slide is just final takeaway messages. The affirmation and appreciation and basic needs, and it's known that those really lead to a more inclusive and productive workforce. Little small things really make a difference. Recognize the messages that we're sending and know that attitudes really affect the behavior. But also the other way around, our behavior also impacts our attitudes. So by we practicing more macroaffirmations, it's contagious. So we have more of that process. And also it doesn't take time. It's the same. You saw it. It's the same scenario. We saw very different responses. It's free. It's just more about being deliberate about creating that environment. And with that, I would like to invite you, make an invitation on the next slide. We all have a role to play. I would like for us to try it out. Try it out the next week or so with that person that was in your initial exercise, or someone else that practice it with everyone, but specifically with those that you see more differences with. I know it's maybe hard, especially the ones that we hold in the lower scale of inclusion, but if we challenge ourselves to be more deliberate about the positive messages that we send, I hope we can create we can activate inclusion and create a more inclusive workspaces. Thank you, Ingo.
Thank you, Ana. That was truly insightful. I did the exercise and I don't know about everybody else, but for me, I already realized how I'm reacting differently to some people, even without noticing that much. And there are a couple of people which I'm okay with. That's what the word I would use. And some people which I really truly affirm and like to have around. And I can see how my kind of biases and my kind of micro, if you want to call them aggressions, I still have a hard time with the word, but yes, there might be aggressions affect their behavior and the relationship that I have with them. So that's certainly something that I take away and try out. If you worked along this program, let me know in the comments below what you found out about your biases and your reactions. You've heard a little bit of what I found out in this program, and I'm looking forward to learn from you about how do you plan to go about these. That said, if you want to find ways on how to be more purposeful and actually start engaging in new ways, check out our class on inclusion nudges. And as always, if you want to interact with the speakers, with each other, and join our community, feel free to join one of our upcoming live classes, which you can find on schoolofbecoming.org. With that, I hope I will be able to welcome you to one of our live classes sometime in the future.